My name is Mara. I'm 28. I live in a town people call charming when they drive through it and backwards when they finally leave. Somewhere in upstate New York, the kind of place where everyone knows your face, and no one lets you forget it. Especially when your face looks like mine. I was born with lentigines, those dark spots all over my skin that people mistake for freckles until they realize they're everywhere. My cheeks, my forehead, my arms, my chest. Some people think it's a rash. Others flinch, thinking it's contagious. I got used to the stares by the time I was 8. By 12, I'd stopped hoping anyone would stop staring. The tattoos came later. My small rebellion, tiny flowers and spiders and lines down my arms, just to confuse them more. If they were going to look anyway, at least let them wonder what they were looking at. My sister Lila and I have never looked alike. She's blonde, soft, glowing, like someone who belongs in bridal magazines. People used to say we were adopted, which we weren't. I was just the other daughter, the one teachers forgot at school concerts, the one boys didn't text back. I tried to shrink, to wear sleeves, to stand behind others in photos. I tried, but you can't really hide skin like mine. Not when the world is determined to make it your entire personality. Last week, 7 days before her wedding, Lila invited me over to try on dresses for the rehearsal dinner. I was surprised, honestly. We hadn't been close in years, but I thought maybe this was her olive branch. I even did my makeup, light foundation, not to hide the spots, just to feel a little polished. I borrowed a black jumpsuit, tied my hair, back, and took the train to her condo. When she opened the door, I saw it immediately, the hesitation in her eyes. That flicker, like she had forgotten for a moment what I looked like, and was suddenly reminded. We didn't even make it to the dress. She poured wine, gave me that soft, pitying smile she always reserves for me, and sat me down on the edge of her perfect white sofa. And then she said it. Calm, clinical, like she was giving me helpful feedback. She said she was worried that my skin, my condition, she called it, might be a little intense for some of the guests. That the photographer might struggle with editing. That her fiancé had asked once privately if I would be wearing long sleeves. She said I wasn't doing anything wrong, of course not. But I had to understand. Her wedding day needed to be beautiful, clean, seamless. She actually used the word seamless. I nodded. I swallowed. I sat there with my wine and nodded like I was in a job interview, like I was being reasonable, like I hadn't just been told I was too visually offensive for family photographs. She kept talking. Some nonsense about table placements, floral arrangements, but I wasn't listening. All I could hear was the echo of her voice from a second ago. You might make people uncomfortable, like I was a warning label, like my body was an inconvenience. When I left, she hugged me gently, as if I might break, as if she had done something brave. I walked 4 blocks before I let my face shift. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked through downtown, past the stores we used to shop in, past the bakery where we used to split cupcakes, past the photo studio where our mother made us pose in matching dresses. In every window, there was a reflection of me, spotted, marked, undeniable. I've spent most of my life trying not to take up too much space, not to disturb anyone's view. But in that moment, walking past those windows, I realized something I hadn't dared to before. I wasn't the stain. I was the truth they wanted to crop out. The first photo to disappear was from the living room wall in my parents' house, the one taken at Grandma Ruth's 80th birthday, the last time we'd all been in the same room. I was standing on the far left, barely in frame, wearing a navy dress that clung too tight to my arms. I remember hating that photo, the way the flash made my spots look darker, like bruises, like something that needed fixing. But still, it was the only picture where I stood next to Dad. It vanished without a word. I noticed it 3 days after seeing Lila. At first I thought it had fallen, or maybe the frame broke. But then I saw the new print hanging in its place. A filtered shot of Lila and her fiancé on a sailboat, glowing in golden hour light. Her hair caught just perfectly by the wind. It wasn't an accident. It was a replacement. I didn't say anything. I just watched quietly as it continued. The album my mother used to keep on the coffee table, full of Polaroids, candids, birthdays, was suddenly slimmed down. Cropped edges, gaps in the plastic sleeves, places where pictures had clearly been peeled away. I recognized the spaces like scars. My 5th grade graduation, the day I got my tattoo, the one Christmas I actually smiled in a group shot. Gone. All gone. I wasn't even sure they were trying to be cruel. That's what made it worse. They weren't angry. They were erasing me like mold from a wall. Quietly, efficiently, with the kind of calm people reserve for cleaning up messes. When I asked my cousin Elena if she'd gotten her wedding invite yet, she said yes. She told me about the venue, the flowers, the plated dinner options. She hesitated just a second too long before asking if I'd be giving a speech. That's when I checked the mail again, even though I'd already checked it every day. Nothing. No envelope. No embossed lettering. No save the date. Nothing. I didn't confront anyone. There was no dramatic call. No begging for inclusion. I just sat with it. Sat in the knowledge that while they hadn't told me I was uninvited, they'd simply made me optional, disposable, the kind of guest who wouldn't be missed, the kind of sister who made people shift uncomfortably in their seats. I imagined them sitting around the dinner table, planning the rehearsal, passing lists back and forth. My name probably never even came up. Or worse, it did, and they chose to skip it. For everyone's comfort. The final confirmation came through Instagram. A boomerang from the bridal shower, champagne flutes clinking, pink balloons, smiling, faces. In the back, on the fridge, was the seating chart. It was blurry, but I zoomed in, pixel by pixel. 47 names. Mine wasn't one of them. That night, I dreamed of being in the group photo at the wedding. Only in the dream. Every time the camera flashed, my body became transparent. The photographer would tilt his head, confused, asking everyone to scoot, in tighter. I watched myself disappear, frame by frame, until Lila stood alone, framed perfectly between our parents, her dress flawless, her skin smooth, her story intact. I woke up with my heart racing. Not from sadness, not even from rage. From the cold, quiet realization that I was being gently written out. As if my existence had been a season the family didn't like, and now they were editing the script. And no one, not even Lila, was going to stop it. Because it was easier this way. No explanations, no confrontation. Just clean, curated silence. The kind of silence that looks elegant in photos. She called me the next morning, just as the sun was beginning to press through my window blinds, casting those soft, hopeful lines across the floor, like the day was offering something clean, something unbroken. Her voice was low and deliberate, like she'd rehearsed every word. She asked how I'd been sleeping, if work was going well, if I'd seen the new floral arrangements Lila had picked out. I knew it was coming. There was a pause, long and syrupy, where she waited for me to say something she could latch onto, some opening for the thing she really called to say. I gave her nothing. I let the silence hang. So she moved forward with that gentle but sharp tone she used when I was a child, and she had to correct me without looking like she was hurting me. She told me not to take it personally. That's how she started, not to take it personally. She said the wedding photos were going to be forever, framed and passed down, shown at future anniversaries, maybe even to Lila's children. That this wasn't just a day, it was a legacy, and legacies needed to look a certain way. She used the word aesthetic. She said she'd learned about it on Pinterest. Clean lines, soft tones, cohesion. I didn't fit. Not because I'd done anything wrong, of course. She was quick to say that. Over and over, she reassured me that no one was blaming me. It was just reality. Some faces aren't camera-friendly. Some skin types cast shadows. The photographer, she claimed, would have a hard time editing around my condition, and it might make things awkward. For Lila. For the guests. For the vision. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my cheek, and stared at the old birthday card still pinned to my wall, the one she sent me last year with the words, "Never forget how beautiful you are," scrawled in gold ink. I remembered how it had made me cry at the time. I thought it was genuine. Now I realized it was just a template. She asked me again, not to be hurt. Said I could still come by the house before the wedding, help with final touches if I wanted. Just maybe not be too visible during the ceremony. There were going to be photographers everywhere, and she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable either. It was about everyone's comfort, she said, not just mine. I tried to imagine what she saw when she looked at me. Not my mother, but the version of her that fit into bridal parties and family portraits. What did she see? The blotches? The dark spots along my jawline? The uneven tone of my chest where my tattoo broke the flow? Was it the way I never learned to pose like Lila? Soft and symmetrical, with just enough chin tilt and just enough mystery in the eyes? Or maybe it was deeper. Maybe she saw me and remembered all the ways I didn't turn out the way she planned. Not fragile, not beautiful, not safe. She said she loved me. She said it like it was a conclusion, like we had reached the end of something and now needed to agree to walk away. I said nothing. Just breathed slowly, deliberately, trying to stay inside my own body while she finished her little speech. When she hung up, I didn't cry. That surprised me. I think I had cried so many times over smaller cuts that my body had no tears left for the bigger wound. Later that day, I looked through the wedding website Lila had created. There was a section called Our Story, filled with professional engagement shots in pastel fields, candles, sunset lighting. Her smile was effortless, every image curated like a Pinterest board. There was a family tab too, a list of names, bios, even fun facts. I wasn't there. Not a mention, not even a line. It was like I had never existed. Like I was some early design flaw in a home they'd decided to renovate. I closed the site and stared at my reflection in the black screen. My face, marked and shadowed, stared back without apology. I tried to imagine it through their lens. Too much, too strange, too off-brand. And I wondered if this was what they had always wanted. Not to hurt me outright, but to slowly fade me out. To build a family album where I didn't have to be cropped, because I simply wasn't there to begin with. It happened 2 days before the wedding, in the back garden of my parents' house, where Lila and her bridesmaids were having their final prep session. A little outdoor brunch with champagne, fruit platters, and folded napkins shaped like roses. I hadn't been invited, of course, but I was still helping with the setup. Mom had asked me to make myself useful, which meant staying out of sight while laying out the guest favors and making sure the flower arrangements weren't wilting. I'd arrived early, stayed quiet, moved like a ghost along the edges of the patio, avoiding eye contact, avoiding attention, the way I'd learned to do for most of my life. They didn't see me step back behind the garden hedge when they came out. They didn't see me crouch down by the side wall when the laughter started. At first, it was the usual bridal chatter, matching robes, high heels, spray tans, who was going to cry first during the vows. I let it wash over me like white noise, like I wasn't even there. Then someone mentioned the rehearsal photos, how perfect everyone looked. Lila said something about lighting, about how important it was to have a cohesive aesthetic. That word again, cohesive. It felt like a buzzsaw every time I heard it now. One of the girls laughed, said the photographer had probably been relieved not to deal with skin distractions. Another one chimed in, asking if I'd really been cut out from the final layout or if that was just a rumor. And then it came. The voice I'd recognize anywhere. Mara, the leather monster. The bridesmaids burst out laughing. They said I looked like worn-out handbag skin, like snake skin turned inside out. One of them even said they were scared I might flake into the food. I couldn't move. I just stayed crouched there, my back pressed against the stone wall, the blood pounding, in my ears like a drum. Every word etched itself into me like a second layer of scars. I knew these girls. I'd grown up with some of them, shared juice boxes in kindergarten, borrowed lip gloss in middle school, and now they were tearing into me like I was a character on a reality show they could roast without consequence. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was that Lila laughed, not just politely, not nervously. She laughed like it was funny, like she was proud, like she had finally earned her place among girls who said those kinds of things. I waited to hear her defend me. I waited to hear her say that was too far, that I was still her sister, that we don't joke like that. But the only thing she said was that she was glad things wouldn't be awkward on the big day, that she didn't want any last-minute drama. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff and trembling. I didn't step into view. I just turned away, walked around the side of the house, and left without saying anything. The walk home felt longer than usual. My limbs felt heavy, like each step dragged some invisible weight behind me. I didn't cry. My body was past crying. It was something colder now. A stillness I didn't recognize. Something sharp forming in the hollow parts of my chest. At home, I sat in front of the mirror for what felt like hours. I studied every spot. Every patch of hyperpigmented skin, every tattoo I'd used to reclaim space on my own body. I ran my fingers over them, slow and deliberate, like tracing a map of my survival. They called me a monster. But monsters don't hide. Monsters don't shrink. Monsters don't weep in corners. Monsters show up, uninvited, and remind people why they should have been scared. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking of every moment I'd made myself small to keep others comfortable. Of every birthday party where I stood behind the cake so I wouldn't ruin the photo. Of every cousin who forgot to tag me on social media. Of every forced smile from strangers trying not to stare too long. The girls in that garden thought they were being cruel in secret. They didn't know I was listening. They didn't know they gave me exactly what I needed. Not rage, not revenge, clarity. They had drawn the line, and now I knew exactly which side I stood on. The morning of the rehearsal, the air felt unnaturally still. I opened my window to the same quiet street, the same unmoving trees, the same flickering street lamp that always buzzed in the early hours. Everything felt exactly the same, and that sameness stung in a way I hadn't anticipated. I watched as a town car pulled up to the curb across the street, sleek, black, decorated with a small ivory ribbon on the antenna, a touch no one else would notice unless they were searching for something to feel left out of. I watched Lila step into it, her robe fluttering just a bit in the wind, her heels clutched in one hand like she was some heroine in a bridal ad. My father followed close behind, holding her garment bag like it was made of glass, like he was carrying treasure. He didn't glance toward my apartment window. I wasn't sure he even remembered where I lived anymore. I had texted him the night before. Just something small, a reminder that I'd need to find a way to the rehearsal space since public transit didn't reach that far. I didn't ask for anything specific, just a heads up if there was a car service I should know about, or if someone was coordinating transportation. He left it on red. Hours passed, then morning, then silence. It was clear. There would be no ride for me. No gentle, passive logistics to help me arrive like I belonged. I took the bus as far as it would go, and then walked the last 20 minutes on foot, heels in my backpack, dust gathering on the hem of my dress. The summer heat clung to my skin, and by the time I reached the venue, a converted vineyard with whitewashed walls and perfect golden hour lighting, I already felt stained. Wrong. Like I was showing up to a dream I hadn't been invited into. I caught sight of myself in the glass door and almost turned back. My skin was flushed, my chest blotched from sun and exertion, and the tattoos across my arms felt louder than usual, like they were screaming for attention. I pushed through it. I had made it this far. Inside, people milled about with champagne, in hand and smiles preset on their faces, polished and ready. They looked through me, around me. One aunt offered a half smile I'd seen her give to waiters, and then turned away before I could respond. My father stood near the makeshift altar, adjusting Lila's veil while someone snapped behind-the-scenes photos with a professional-grade camera. I stood by the back wall, holding my bag like it was a shield, waiting for anyone to acknowledge that I'd arrived. No one did. Later, I overheard him talking to someone about how much the dress had cost. He laughed, proud, saying how it had been a worthy investment for a day like this. Thousands of dollars in fabric and lace. I thought of my own dress, borrowed from an old friend who hadn't worn it in years. I'd steamed it twice, repaired a seam by hand, and stitched my own hem. No one asked how I'd gotten there. No one offered a seat. No one even offered water. I wanted to believe he'd just forgotten. That in the chaos of wedding prep and excitement, something as small as my existence had slipped through the cracks. But it wasn't forgetfulness. It was intentional. Just enough distance to avoid confrontation. Just enough neglect to be deniable. And worst of all, it came from the man who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was too small to see the parade. Who used to hold my hand when crossing the street. Who once told me I was brave for refusing to cover my spots with makeup when I was 13. Now he couldn't even spare a phone call. Not a ride. Not a gesture. Just silence. Just that polite, quiet erasure I'd come to recognize too well. When the rehearsal ended and people clapped at nothing in particular, I walked the vineyard alone, past the rows of chairs, past the string lights and floral arches. I stood under the willow tree near the back of the lot, out of sight, where no one would follow. I looked up into the branches and thought how beautiful they were, twisting, imperfect, unpredictable, like something that had never asked to be part of a centerpiece. Stayed there until it got dark. No one came looking. No one called my name. The bathroom smelled like roses and bleach, that sharp, artificial kind of clean that makes everything feel temporary. I had locked myself inside one of the private stalls on the mezzanine floor of the hotel, away from the main ballroom, away from the chattering voices and the soft clinks of champagne glasses. My phone buzzed twice in my purse, but I didn't check it. I already knew what it would say. Timelines, instructions, someone reminding me to stay out of the way. I had followed those unspoken instructions so well I'd nearly disappeared. Sat there for a long time, staring at the tiled floor beneath my heels, then finally stood and walked to the sink. The overhead light was harsh, clinical, the kind that magnifies everything, pores, scars, every imperfection. I looked up and met my own eyes in the mirror. There I was, Mara, 28, undressed by fluorescent light. My skin bloomed with its usual constellations of pigment and contrast. My neck, my collarbones, the line of my jaw, marked and uneven, unapologetic. I could see the edge of my tattoo creeping above the neckline of the dress. I could see the place where my left shoulder bore the large patch of discoloration that people stared at the longest, the one that looked like a burn, though it wasn't. I adjusted the strap of my dress, pulled it higher, then lower, then back again. There was no fixing it. There was only choosing what to show. I had come here thinking I could just be invisible. That maybe if I stood far enough in the back, wore enough neutral tones, softened my eyes, kept my arms crossed, I could be a ghost in the background of their perfect day. But there was no part of me that belonged in this hotel, with its white marble floors and its subtle gold trim. I didn't fit in the mirror, let alone the room. Everything about me screamed contradiction to their narrative. Outside, music was starting to rise. I could hear the distant swell of the processional, the murmur of people standing and turning in their seats. It was almost time. My fingers gripped the edge of the sink, cold porcelain grounding me like an anchor, like the only solid thing I could trust. My pulse echoed in my ears, a low rhythmic thud that blurred my thoughts. My makeup had held, surprisingly. My eyeliner hadn't smudged, though my lip color had faded. I hadn't cried. Not yet. Not even when the bridesmaids passed me earlier and acted like they didn't see me. Not even when my mother complimented Lila's earrings and didn't look at me at all. I thought of leaving, slipping out the side exit, walking to the train station, sitting in silence with the city blurring outside the window. I had done it before. Disappeared quietly, without a scene, without demanding space. It would be easy. No one would stop me. No one would notice until it was over. Maybe not even then. But I stayed. I stayed rooted there, watching the flicker of myself in the mirror, shoulders drawn tight, spine straightening almost imperceptibly, breath deepening. I remembered the names they'd called me, the words they'd thrown like stones. Leather, monster, embarrassing, too much. And still, I stood. Still, I looked. Still, I breathed. I remembered the little girl I used to be, the one who covered her arms in summer just to avoid questions from strangers, the one who layered turtlenecks in July, the one who once asked her mother if she could wear foundation on her legs so no one would see the difference. That girl was still inside me, and right now, she was begging me not to run. Not this time. The music swelled again, louder now, closer. Someone knocked on the bathroom door, lightly, once, then silence. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I already knew what I was going to do. I smoothed the front of my dress, ran a hand down the side seam, and straightened the chain of the necklace that had slipped sideways in all my pacing. I took one last look, really looked, and saw everything. They hated. Everything I'd learned to carry. Everything they tried to crop out. It was all there, and it was staying. The lights in the ballroom had dimmed just enough to make everything feel cinematic. Candles flickered on every table, casting warm halos across champagne flutes and sequined dresses. A gentle hum of conversation floated in the air. Polite, rehearsed, self-conscious. The DJ was fading out some instrumental string version of a pop song, and the MC, a guy with too much gel in his hair and a microphone he didn't quite know how to use, tapped twice and cleared his throat. It was time for the toasts. I waited at the edge of the room, just beyond the archway, half shadowed by the curtain that separated the bar from the main event. No one saw me. Their eyes were trained on the glowing spotlight at the front of the room where Lila stood with a flute of rosé in hand, her face already damp with the performative tears she could conjure so easily. I had watched her rehearse that cry in mirrors as a teenager. Now she delivered it like clockwork. She thanked everyone, especially the bridesmaids. She thanked our parents. She thanked the universe. I waited. Then came the planned surprise, a video montage, a celebration of love and family. The projector screen dropped from the ceiling with a soft motorized hum, and people clapped as a slideshow began to play. Childhood photos, school dances, summer vacations, Lila and Dad on the beach, Lila and Mom baking cookies, Lila on her first day of college, laughing with a roommate I'd never met. I watched from the shadows as frame after frame confirmed what I already knew. I was gone. Not once did I appear, not even as background noise. It was as if I had never been born. That was my cue. I stepped out from the curtain, walking calmly, heels silent on the carpet. No one noticed until I reached the small staircase that led to the platform near the DJ booth. The MC turned, confused. One of the bridesmaids blinked, her jaw slack. I didn't look at any of them. I walked straight to the projector controls, slid the USB drive from my pocket, and without hesitation, replaced theirs with mine. The screen flickered. A brief glitch. Then silence. The first image appeared. A family portrait. All of us. But not the glossy, retouched version from their curated timeline. This was the original, the real one. The one with me in the corner, standing stiffly beside Lila, too tall, too awkward, my arm half-cropped by whoever took the photo. My face unreadable, my skin unfiltered. Then came more. Photos they had deleted, hidden, removed from albums. Pictures of birthday parties where I was half out of frame. School ceremonies where I stood at the edge of the stage, clutching certificates no one remembered. Candid shots where I smiled too hard, or not at all, where my face was bare and brave and never. Quite enough. The room had gone silent. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Each image spoke louder than I ever could. A slideshow of erasure in reverse. A resurrection. There was one photo near the end I had debated leaving out. A close-up. My face filling the frame, eyes red-rimmed from crying, taken, during a hospital visit years ago. I had taken the picture myself, trying to process the way the fluorescent lighting made every mark on my skin look 10 times worse. I left it in, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. The final slide was a video. Short. It showed me at 17, standing in front of a mirror, hesitating, then slowly pulling off my sweater to reveal the spots across my arms for the first time in public. The camera had been resting on a shelf, tilted slightly. You could barely hear the sound of my breath. But it played in full. No music. No narration. Just breath. When the screen went dark, I turned around and faced the room. No applause. Not yet. Just silence, thick and unmoving. Lila stood frozen beside her new husband, her mouth slightly open. My mother's hand gripped the edge of the tablecloth like she needed it to stay upright. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. I stepped down from the stage, one hand brushing lightly along the edge of the podium as I passed, grounding myself. The weight in the room had shifted. They didn't know what to do with me now. I wasn't a mistake they could crop out. I had made myself the frame. For a moment, no one moved. The silence after the last slide felt like a held breath stretched too long, like the entire room had paused mid-beat and didn't know how to restart. I stood at the foot of the stage, heart hammering in my chest, not from fear anymore, but from the heavy stillness of being fully seen. It was a silence I'd never been granted before, one that wasn't avoidance, but attention. Raw, uncomfortable, undeniable attention. I had stepped into a space I wasn't invited into and taken it without asking. Now they had to decide how to respond. Lila lowered her glass slowly. Her perfect posture faltered just slightly, her shoulders tensing as though the weight of the entire wedding had shifted onto her dress. Her eyes darted across the room, maybe searching for someone to say something, to save her. But no one did. Not even our mother, who sat frozen in her chair, lips parted, one hand clutching her pearl necklace so tightly I thought it might snap. I looked across the sea of faces, waiting for someone to boo, to scoff, to laugh and pull the moment back into discomfort. But none of that came. Instead, it started with a sound I wasn't prepared for. The scrape of a chair leg dragging backward against the floor. A man I didn't recognize stood up near the back. Then another. A woman in a navy blue gown pushed herself to her feet. Then another, and another. One by one, people rose, not in protest, not in panic, but with a kind of slow, deliberate weight, like they were waking up from something and choosing to rise anyway. They didn't clap. Not at first. That would have cheapened it, I think. Made it feel like entertainment. This wasn't applause. It was acknowledgement. A reckoning. People looked at me. Not through me. Not around me. But directly. Plainly. And without apology. Their gazes didn't burn or slice or recoil the way I was used to. They held. Steady. Measured. And in that holding, I felt something shift deep beneath my ribs. A trembling tectonic adjustment I hadn't known I needed. Respect. Not for how I looked or for how I had endured it, but for how I stood in it, how I let them see what they'd chosen to forget. Lila was still standing, but her presence had dimmed. She no longer sparkled under the chandeliers. The golden light didn't catch her the same way. It passed through her now, refracted by something larger than her dress, her vows, or her performance. For once, the stage she had always occupied without question didn't belong to her. She tried to step forward, to reclaim the attention, to say something, anything. But her voice caught. She glanced toward our parents. Neither one met her eyes. My father looked at me then. Really looked. His expression was unreadable. Part guilt, part awe, part something too deep to name. I didn't offer him a smile. I didn't need to. This moment wasn't about reconciliation. It was about presence. I was here. Fully. Finally. As I turned to walk back down the aisle, not the wedding aisle, but the narrow path between rows of stunned guests, people moved to make space for me. No one whispered. No one turned away. A few nodded, barely perceptible, but real. I passed the bridesmaids' table. Their eyes were wide, mouths tight. One of them had tears on her lashes. Another looked down at her lap like she couldn't hold my gaze. Outside, the air hit my skin like a second awakening, cooler now. The sun lower. The evening light spread long shadows across the marble steps, and I let myself breathe in, deep and slow. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to grieve. Inside, I knew the wedding would continue. The music would start again. The toasts would resume, the glasses would clink, but nothing would be the same. A shift had happened. The curated illusion had cracked, and through it, something real had been born. I had walked in as the family secret. The blemish they tried to crop out. The stain they blurred in the background. I walked out as the truth. And for the first time in my life, the room didn't shrink away from it. It stood. It saw me. It stayed.